So, continuing on in the Best Life Possible series, this is part two of listening for the voice of God. Now, if you haven't seen part one, I would recommend that you either read the online devotional on Facebook or on my website at www.thedivineplanofgod, or better yet, watch the video either as listed on YouTube, Facebook, or also the website. You're kind of coming in the middle of the story, and you'll need to have that background. So yesterday's story ended kind of like this, where the daughter of the woman who was in the hospital bed, uh, who had been, she said to me, my mother's been this way for nearly 12 hours. And she began to cry and say, who are you? So I walked over to the foot of the bed where she was. And suddenly, surprisingly, she hugged me and was crying and began thanking me before I could even answer her question. But I'll never forget her next words. She said, looked at me real hard and said, "Are you an angel?" And I said, "No, I'm not an angel." I remember smiling. I said, "Why don't we just sit for a moment and talk?" So I introduced myself to her and asked her name and her father's name and her mother's name. And she was curious, but yet a bit confused about all that just took place. But I told her that God deeply cared for her, and what we just experienced was not something by my hand, but was intended by God for them, because He loved them and wanted to have compassion upon them. So her dad and I both talked for a short time. I asked about their beliefs and began to talk about Jesus, and just had a very sweet time with them, relating to them God's desire to love them and have a relationship with them. So I said my goodbyes and began to walk on the other side to come back to where my friend was. And I happened to turn around before I sat in the chair where my friend was, and she quickly came to me and just gave me this huge hug again and thanked me. It was overwhelming. I can tell you that. So why am I telling you all this? Well, this is one of many events that God's allowed me to be part of. It has to do with listening to the voice of God. And I'm sure in many ways I'm just like you. I would read these tremendous stories in the Bible and wish I could see them or be part of them. But let me be really clear. It's not because, well, they were so miraculous, but because it was my intense desire and my love for God's people and for a broken and fractured humanity that are without Christ. You know, a deepening faith and relationship of Christ is marked by becoming like Him. And I found becoming like Him. You and I were originally made in His image. And when we became saved and and began forming a relationship with Christ again, all the best of who He is in that image, His love, His compassion, forgiveness, we'll find that those who want relationship with Him, a deep relationship, not something superficial, but really a deep relationship with God, will find that these things are being restored back to us again. You know, let's face it, as Christians, we all want to be have a clear understanding of how we can hear from God. And sometimes we hear Him or find Him through reading in the Bible, and other times we may be struck by a sermon and He's speaking somewhere to us in a circumstance that we're in. And as Christians, we should really be clear that it's God's desire to communicate with those who love Him and are truly committed to Him. And the question I always had and always asked was, is there more? Now, that's not a question of dissatisfaction, just merely a statement of curiosity. I mean, I've been a Christian for over 30 years, excuse me, and have really been digging more and more deeply into the Word, building my relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ. And I keep finding out there's so much I don't know. I mean, I'm literally amazed by what I don't know, and just how great it is to deepen this relationship. So, is there more? Oh yeah. Oh yeah, there is more than you can imagine, and that story kind of illustrated it. So how does one listen for the voice of God? And I mean, what's it like? How does it happen? And more importantly, maybe why does it happen? And before I actually answer those questions, which will be in tomorrow's devotional, and I know some of you are thinking, let's get to it, but I want to tell you one more story to illustrate some of the meaning of this in a different circumstance. And so I'm just going to continue with that right now because it won't take long to tell its story, but it'll take much longer to write it. So I'll tell you that story, and then we'll finish on the series in part 3 tomorrow of what it's like listening for the voice of God. So 2 years ago, my wife and I were at Kmart deciding to buy a Christmas tree. We're not going to do the real thing. We're going to do the fake thing. And we got our tree. We go to the checkout. And when it came time for us, I happened to have a coupon. And at the time, I handed the coupon to the lady at the register. Excuse me. And the coupon didn't work. There was something wrong with it. And this is an older lady, probably maybe in her 70s, and working a sweet little thing, working at Kmart. Well, as she turned to try to talk to me, she was doing this, like her voice was, this raspy, almost you can't hear her voice. Couldn't make out what she was saying. I kind of leaned in to listen because she was really having difficulty. And she like held her finger up like just a minute, and she wrote down like I'm gonna get some help about the coupon. So I didn't think much of it, and she kind of turned on the light, and there was a few people behind us in line, and she kind of stepped away backwards from the register and stood there and almost looked embarrassed, like she didn't want it to take real long for me, and she was being very kind. So I happened to look and saw her name tag, and her name tag was D. Well, that's my stepdaughter's name is D. And then no sooner did I notice that, then what I'll describe to you tomorrow, I hear the voice of God. Not literally. Remember, I mentioned in the first devotional about this, that he speaks through emotion and compassion. There's this sense of things that I'll get to tomorrow. But I just knew there's something here. And so I began to say to her, you know what? My stepdaughter's name is Dee. And she kind of like this cute little smile. And I kind of got this boldness. And I said, that you're voicing us. That's really, really bothering you tonight. And she kind of nodded her head in politeness. I said, well, while we're waiting, why don't I just pray for you? Big smile on her face, which I never know how people are going to react. And she actually walked towards me and put her hand out. And I mean, seriously, I was shocked, but I know this is God designed, right? And when I tell you the rest of it, you'll really know this God designed. But remember how it began by I noticed something, and that I think it's me that's doing the noticing, but we'll talk about Christ in us, who's really doing the noticing, even though we think we're thinking the thoughts. So I take her hand, and I pray with her, with people in line, right at the register. And again, it was a bit like the moments in the hospital. I remember not all the words, but I remember asking for her voice to be restored because she needs to do her job. And I remember asking God that and saying to this body that your voice will be restored, so you can do what you need to do. Something of that nature, just praying for release for her voice to come back to her. So no sooner do we finish than here comes the manager. She steps away and shows her the note because she didn't even try to talk. And I didn't think anything of it. And the manager comes over and bang, 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 punches some stuff in and went, oh, this should have worked. It's okay now. So she looked a little surprised. The manager walks away. She begins to ring me up at the register. And she turns around and went, oh, that'll be $137.90. And she kind of just stopped and looked at me. And I remember doing this. Let's see if I can do it for you on camera. I said, God deeply cares about you. He loves you. And this moment was designed just for you by him. Oh my, the smile. And her voice is back. Her voice is restored. I mean, I don't know about you, But this was one of a lot of different events that have occurred to me, and I am blown away at God's love for people, that He wants to use us. So we said our goodbyes. Then I noticed too she was wearing a cross. I said, "Are you a Christian?" And she nodded yes. So that's the next story. So I'll see you tomorrow, where we discuss how we can be listening for the voice of God.